So hi, my name's Judi and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Tenovus Cancer Care. And I'm in conversation today with a very good friend of mine, Lesley-Anne Long. Lesley-Anne is the Chief Executive and President, no less, of an organisation called GBC Health. Lesley-Anne is actually based in Washington, DC, but I am here today in Cardiff. So we have a pond between us. So thanks very much for joining us, first of all, Lesley-Anne. It's good to see you again.
My pleasure.
So what I wanted to start off really was just asking about your career to date. So what got you to where you are now?
Oh, a lot of mistakes actually got me to where I am now. But I just want to say I have such a soft spot for Wales and Cardiff. I went to university at Cardiff, and so it's always felt like a kind of second home for me, and I've maintained a lot of connections there. But to get here and sitting in Washington, DC, started kind of back in the day when I left university and was first working in Marks and Spencer's as a retail manager. Realised that was not for me and spent a couple of years travelling around Europe having a wonderful time, and then came back to the UK and trained as a teacher. And I did that for a few years. I was teaching English, teaching drama, which kind of suited my personality quite well, and then had 3 boys in the space of 3 years. So decided that what I really wanted to do was follow my passion, which was law. So I studied and retrained and became a barrister, and I was working in family law in London. And it was quite tough because the boys were all under 4 when I started. But in a way, having that opportunity to do the studying and to do something that was separate from kind of all the caretaking at home was just wonderful for me. And I absolutely fell in love with law. So I was a practicing barrister for quite a few years. But then, my personal life shifted. I was a single parent, albeit with a great relationship with my former husband, but had a lot more time where I needed to be at home with the boys. And so I felt the right move would be to go into academia, where in my mind I would be sitting at home and writing books. And of course, it didn't quite turn out that way. So nonetheless, I went into academia at the Open University, which is, of course, where you and I met, Judi.
Which I 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
20
oh my
years
God.
ago. I know. We must have been children, Lesley-Anne. We must have been children.
Very young. And as you know, I joined there as an academic, and then kind of fast forward became the Dean of the Faculty of Health and Social Care. And it was in that role that I was invited to go with colleagues from the Open University to Ethiopia on a delegation to meet with the Minister of Health, Minister of Education, to look at how the university could support their aspirations around large-scale learning. And I met Minister of Health, Tedros, who is now the head of the WHO. And sort of between us, we started talking about this vision he had for a national programme training community health workers. And it just got me fired up. And again, long story short, we managed to get funding. And I worked with him and his team for about 6 years with colleagues from the OU. And we developed the national training plan for 40,000 community health workers, which is still going today. I was back there in 2019, pre-COVID. And we digitized the content, and it's now being delivered by mobile devices. And the model and the program has been replicated in many countries around the world. So that was really, for me, where I fell in love again professionally with looking at supporting community development, particularly supporting women and children in these low resource settings, where I really felt that my experience both as a barrister and working in kind of family law, mediation, working with children and young people, I could bring those skills and my academic skills to working in development. And then I met my husband at a conference on development, and that resulted in me moving to the US and continuing to work in community health, focusing on mobile technology and running a small program that was funded by USAID. Then moved into looking at digital health infrastructure, working with governments, And from there went into consulting, working on leadership with the World Bank and others. And then into this role, which is really bringing everything together, which is about community, about women and children. It is very much about saving lives and the quality of lives, but it's doing it through the magic of bringing people together and helping them do the incredible work that they do in these very challenging settings in sub-Saharan Africa, India, Southeast Asia. So my role is really just to manage things behind the scenes and help make things happen. And I love it. It's exhausting, but I love it.
It's quite, I mean, what an amazing career. I think every time I talk about you and hear that story, it's just phenomenal, really. And I think it's sort of a lesson that for other people that anything is possible, right? You know, you start off doing one thing and thinking your life is going to go in one direction, but there's also something I think about seizing the day. And that's something that I think you have done it many times in your life.
I think we have that in common.
Yeah, I guess we do, and maybe that's why we're such good friends. Yeah, I think so. So that's fascinating, and I guess what I'd like to talk about now is what happened to you in the middle of 2021, because I know that you received some very bad news then. And I just wonder whether you'd like to talk about the lead up to that terrible news that you had.
Yeah. So I had been feeling unwell at a low level for about a year and a half. And I put it down to it's COVID. I'm sat at my desk. I'm in front of a camera for 12 hours a day, sometimes doing meetings, not exercising. And so I put it down to all kinds of, well, it's just every day, it's work, it's stress, and so on. And it started to the point where it was really getting quite uncomfortable to breathe. I had sort of a pain in my side. And in the end, it was my husband said, you really need to go and see your doctor. So resisting all the way, off I went. And her first thought was maybe I had kidney stones, and I've had those in the past. So she said, you need a scan. Now, my feeling is, had I been in the UK, possibly the response would have been, it might be kidney stones, let's treat that and come back in a few weeks if you don't feel better. The sort of default response here to everything is, you need a scan. So off I went, had my scan, got home, and within about half an hour, the phone rang and said, you need to come in immediately, we think your appendix has burst. And my response was, I think it would hurt more if that indeed was the case. Anyway, I went back and they did another scan and then said I needed to stay in for further investigation, and that was in June. And I was operated on to remove my appendix. And then when I woke up, my husband was in the room and he said, it's not your appendix. So I'm like, well, what is it then? He said, it's bad news. I said, how bad? And he said, it's really bad. And then he started to become very upset. So I said, is it cancer? And he said, yes. So I said, really bad? Stage 1, 2? There was like silence, went 4. And he went, yes. And is that the highest number? There was a bit of me that was like, I want to be at the highest. If it's going to be really bad, I want the highest number. And he said, yes. And honestly, I didn't really feel anything except just uncomfortable from the surgery I'd had to take out my appendix. And so that was the end of June. And I just came home feeling a bit sore and a bit uncomfortable and thinking, what's next? And then there were a few weeks of meetings with different doctors to figure out what exactly they could do, because what had happened apparently was my appendix had burst at some point, and the cancer from there had then spread around my abdomen. And it had infected a lot of the different organs in my abdomen and the lining of my abdomen as well. And in the end, by going on YouTube, I found this surgeon who is one of very few in the US who does this very innovative surgery called HIPAC. And so we met online because it was still COVID and lockdown. So we had a Zoom call and he was wonderful. And I just really warmed to him, and he talked me through the process and what it would be like. And in my head I was still thinking, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, they'll just take all the bits out, I'll probably be in hospital 3 or 4 days, and then I'll just come in and rest for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
that was that period when I kind of heard about the news. And one of the things, two things that really helped and I think took away the edge for me, one was I kind of put out on my LinkedIn profile that I would be taking a bit of time off work and why. And the messages of support and love that I had were phenomenal. I mean, just unbelievable. And I actually said to Mark, I said, it's almost like I'm at my own funeral and I'm hearing what people are saying. So it was very special. And the other thing was when I told my board, and they had just appointed me as CEO in February, and here I am in June going, really sorry, guys. But they were fantastic. And my team was amazing. And I felt I had this structure around me that would make it possible to come out the other side. And so it was that feeling of support from my friends and family, plus the support from my work. I thought, I can do this. I'm an upbeat person. I can do this. My surgeon was saying, it's actually got nothing to do with your personality. I was like, I think it has, because I'm really optimistic. He was like, yeah, that's not going to make any difference, Lesley-Anne.
It's interesting that you say that, though, Lesley-Anne, because, a lot of people talk about fighting cancer. There is all of that sort of narrative and ways of describing it, and being, having that positive mental attitude and everything that people, believe. And so where would you be on that sort of scale? What's your personal view?
Well, before surgery, I went in fairly blind. I mean, I watched this nice little animation and they showed, your whole abdomen opened up and spread out and there are all your perfect organs. And then they just zap it with whatever they zap it with and then they stitch you up. Done. I'm like, it doesn't look too bad. I'll be asleep when it's happening. So, yeah, a few days, maybe a week or two to get back on my feet. So I don't know if part of my brain just shut off because I didn't want to deal with it. And the night before going in for surgery, I had to, drink that kind of diesel fluid stuff that basically clears out your colon. So that was ghastly. But I was still working at about 11:30 at night, thinking, just need to get to the end of my to-do list before I go in tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for my surgery. And so I think in a way, it was my brain was just keeping everything going as normal as it could for as long as I could. Yes. And then everything changed. Because not only did I have what is a fairly brutal 16-hour surgery, not soon after that, I then got sepsis, and that nearly finished me off, very nearly finished me off. And then I recovered from that, and then I got pneumonia, and it was really bad, to the point that, the surgeon was kind of getting all my family on Zoom and saying, yeah, we don't think she's going to make it. And so obviously it wasn't a 3-day rest and a week at home getting better. It ended up being a few months in hospital and about 5 or 6 weeks in special care, intensive care. And I have to say, I did not feel very optimistic during that period. I just felt in enormous pain. I mean, really like nothing I've ever experienced. And then with the various drug regime I was on, having 4 or 5 days where I had very bad hallucinations. And so really I had to rethink, what does it mean to go back to work? And what does it mean to be someone I'm not before cancer anymore, I'm after cancer. And it felt like it was a mind shift and I'd become a different person. So it was very strange. I had this 8-week period where I couldn't read, which is like breathing for me. Physically, I couldn't hold anything. I couldn't even listen to music or listen to books because I couldn't take that level of mental stimulation. And all I could do was just lie in this intensive care unit and be taken care of. And that was really difficult. It was the first time I felt I cannot do anything for myself. I'm entirely at the risk of my body's infections and in the hands of these people who are caring for me. And it was really scary.
And that is a massive adjustment, isn't it? That's for somebody like you who is so in control and so focused and driven, to have to surrender. I think, yourself in that situation, which you had to do. You had no choice, did you? So,
Yeah.
so can you tell me, sort of looking back at that time, and I know it was an awful time because I felt like, I was sort of walking sort of virtually alongside you at that time, and having the messages from your family as well. And I agree, it was it was a very deep, dark time, I think, for us all. But what helped you through that, and what didn't help?
So, a weird thing that gave me a slight sense of feeling in control was my hair. I was told that my hair would not fall out because the type of surgery I had involved a 2-hour sort of hot wash with chemo, which all I can describe is like the final rinse in a washing machine. They fill you with the fluid, they kind of stitch you back up, and then they just move your body around for a couple of hours with this hot chemo, and that just basically kills off anything that needs to be killed off. So I was very lucky that I didn't then have to go through a regime of additional chemo afterwards. It's one and done. Yes. But that in its own turn kind of caused the other difficulties I had. And so when my hair started coming out, even though I'd been told that wouldn't happen, I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to have it all shaved. So I phoned Mark and I said, how do you feel about that? And he was like, that really is the least of my concerns right now. But, my hair used to be down to here, and it wasn't amazing, but it was mine. And I just said to the nurse, I want you to shave it all. And she was like, really? And I said yes, and I felt like I was taking control and making a decision. And I can't say the look was too good, to be honest, but luckily I didn't have a mirror, so I didn't have to look at what I looked like. But it felt like I'd made a decision, and someone else had done that for me, and that felt very powerful.
Yes.
And one of my surgeons, bless him, came in and he said, you look so beautiful. And I obviously did not, but he said it like he meant it, and that made me smile.
What a lovely thing to do. Yes.
And then the main thing that really, I believe, saved my life was my sons being able to come and see me. 2 of them based in the UK, and the travel ban was on at the time because of COVID. And so they went through a very protracted and extensive process to get dispensation to be able to travel, including the letter from my surgeon saying, you need to be able to come and say goodbye to your mum. My oldest son lives in America, so he got an Airbnb by the hospital for a month and came in every day. And it was those boys being there that helped me turn the corner, and the group of you and my other girlfriends in the UK sending the WhatsApp messages that Mark would read me. And I used to imagine that the love that I felt from all of you had formed a blanket that was flying across the Atlantic, and I would never sleep, but I would try to go to sleep imagining it was a blanket wrapped around my body, and taking kind of the kind of love and the feeling from that to feel that I wasn't on my own. So they were the things that really helped, even though practically speaking, the things that helped was the amazing care I had, from the nurses and the many, many different teams that were looking at the different parts of my body with like, we're focused on infectious disease, we're focused on cancer, we're focused on whatever. So there were all these different teams. But what really helped was friends and family.
And I think, that's something that I would say, there is the skill of the surgeon, and obviously the access to some of those treatments that you had, not just that the speed of the diagnosis and the extent of all the investigations that you had, which would I believe not have happened if you'd been in the UK. It certainly, as you mentioned before, it wouldn't have happened that quickly. But also, the HIPEC that you described, the chemo wash thing is, if, for example, if you lived in Wales, it's actually not available in Wales. So, the alternative, that's right, people would have to go out of Wales, and only then under very, very special conditions. So I think the difference that made in terms of having that optimum treatment, and the level of care that you received, and that's not to bang the drum for the US health system, obviously, but I think a real sort of salutary reminder of the the need for everybody to have access to that quality and that speed, of diagnosis and treatment. But alongside that, I think, you make the real point that, we can have all of that, but what actually gets us through is all of that emotional support that we get, in however that's expressed. I mean, you called it love, and that's exactly what it is. And I think it really does matter. And I do remember when the boys were there, and it really did feel like a turning point for you.
Mm-hmm.
I also remember not long after that Mark, your husband, sent a photograph around of you on a helipad. Do you want to tell us about you on the helipad?
Oh my God, that was so amazing. These wonderful guys that were either I can't remember what their name was for their team. I do remember they wore purple, and so in the late afternoons after they came off their shift, they would uncouple the bed and they would fix all. I had tubes coming out of me everywhere, and they would bundle it all onto the end of the bed and then cover it up with blankets, and they would take me through the hospital into the lift up to the helipad, and they called it my sunshine treatment. And just to be in the fresh air, even though I was surrounded by all these tubes and things beeping at me and stuff, to be in the fresh air and see the sky was just fantastic. And it was September, so the weather was beautiful. And that was the first time I saw the three boys together. The guys turned my bed around, and the three boys were walking towards me, and they were all dressed in black. It looked like something from, Reservoir Dogs or something. They were kind of striding along in black, looking incredible. And I just beamed. And the two guys that were pushing my bed said, "We have never seen anyone up here look so happy." And it was I know I'm going to be okay because now my boys are here.
Yeah, and that's what therapy means, doesn't it? Really, in that way. So I remember the day that you left hospital after so many months, and so much of that time was touch and go. Can you tell us a little bit about that sort of transition, from getting back home and eventually, getting back to full-time work? But just talk about that period, because I know that was quite tough as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was really hard, and it goes a little bit to what you were saying earlier, Judi, about I do like to be in control, and I'm quite independent, and so not to be able. So I'd gone down. I was about 80 pounds in weight, which is, I don't know, it's 5.5 stone or something, a bit more maybe. But so, and I couldn't really eat, just enough that they would allow me to come home. I still had a PICC line in my arm. I couldn't walk. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't really breathe very well. So I felt helpless. And we turned I'm lucky we have a nice home, and we turned the upstairs sitting room into that became my kind of home, if you like. So I had the bathroom nearby and the bedroom nearby. And, I was lucky because I had Mark, and Mark works from home. And so he took just such great care of me. But, and I had, I had my sister-in-law came to stay, the boys came to stay, you came, Kim came, but I just felt helpless. And I actually felt those first few weeks that I wished I'd died. And I would say that to Mark, which was very hard for him, very hard. But I really felt like that. I was in such discomfort. I would say pain, really. And not to be able to do the things that I totally took for granted. Walk down the road, go and buy coffee, watch a film, laugh. And I just thought, I'll never be able to do. So I was feeling quite sorry for myself, really. But I just thought I'll never be able to do those things again at the level I used to. And I just thought, will I ever get back? What level will I get back to? And, I'd started working again when I was in hospital. I was doing these calls, and I could barely speak. And there I was holding calls, trying to keep things moving along. I got back kind of mid-October, and the first 2 weeks were really, really tough. But then I started working again on the 1st of November. So it's almost a year to the day that I started working again. And I just started with kind of 40% of my time, because I would be so exhausted by one call. I would have to go and lie down afterwards. but it was something about working that gave me my structure back, because I knew I had to get up and I had to look reasonable. You know, I couldn't just be in pajamas. So the top half had to look reasonable. And I had to at least be putting out a bit of energy for my team so they felt that I was back. And they were brilliant while I was away. I mean, they managed so well. They didn't just manage, they led, and they did really well. But I could see that they were also relieved, like, oh, she's back. So I felt a responsibility to perform. But it really helped. And then, you know, with Mark's encouragement and other friends' encouragement, started, you know, eating better, and had a great physiotherapist who was really terrifying. And she was like, you can do this today. And I would be saying, I can't. And she said, you can. And I'm not leaving till you do it. And so constantly pushing me to do more than I thought I could achieve is, I think, what really helped my progress move more rapidly than anyone expected.
Yeah, and I think you know what you talk about there about the sort of that rehab phase, really, which is what it is, isn't it? It's about gathering your strength and taking quite small steps, but supported by people who've kind of been there and done that. Because that physio that you talked about, you know, you wouldn't be her first or only patient. So she, you know, she knows, you know, just how much to sort of push you and when to back off and so on. And I think it's always hard for driven people like yourself to take small steps, because you came out of hospital, and I think there was something about I think your feelings that you described were very related to the fact that you just wanted to, right, I'm out of hospital now, let's get back to normal. And you couldn't, because your body wasn't ready for that. But actually learning to accept those smaller steps. You know, you're now back working full time, traveling. I know that you've, you know, been traveling around the place and actually performing to actually exactly the same level, if not more, than you were before. So I think, you know, there's probably lessons for us there, and perhaps lessons for other people as well. That you know, what you think that there's no hope, and you think that it's never going to happen, but it does. And I guess, you know, sort of looking back now, so how many clear scans have you had in the last year, for example?
2 completely clear. So every 6 months, and my lungs are growing back. My energy is certainly, you know, even compared with a few months ago. Well, I had recently had COVID, so that took a bit of a knock, but my energy is so much better. I was in London in early September, and I took a walk along the Thames in the sun, and I had to sit down a few times, but I walked on and off for about 4 hours, and that was just in heels. Can I say?
Of course.
But I guess that, and there were a few moments I got to I was on the South Bank, and I got to Waterloo Bridge, and I looked up at the steps. I'm like, oh my God, can I get up all those stairs? And there is a little bit of like still pulling myself up sometimes by the stair rails. But, you know, when I look back a year ago, I couldn't even walk the length of a room. And here I was walking the Thames. And I did get up to the top of the steps and walk across Waterloo Bridge and down the other side and back to my hotel. And so even really small things like I can step up onto a curb. I couldn't do that last November. I literally did not have the strength to get my foot up from the road onto the pavement. So to be able to go up the steps to Waterloo Bridge, which, you know, I could see all these young people running past me, like, God damn you and your young fitness. But, you know, I can do it. And I'm so lucky.
Yes.
I'm so lucky. So every time I can do something that I couldn't do 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, I think I am so lucky. That really helps when I have days, because I still have days when I'm a bit weepy and don't feel great. But those things get me through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what I'd like to do, just to ask the final question really, is that given everything you've gone through, and it is, you know, incredible that you have survived it, but not only have you survived it, but, you know, you're thriving again. Looking back on it, how do you think, has it changed your outlook on life or not?
I don't think it's made me a better person, if that's the only question.
You can't improve on perfection.
Oh, yes, really. Talk to you about that afterwards. I think it's those things I said, those small things that I took utterly for granted.
Yes.
That I now appreciate so much.
Yes.
But I guess one thing that has shifted slightly is I can look ahead from a work perspective and plan what do the next 7 years look like for my organisation and so on. I find it quite hard to plan more than the next 6 months personally. So I'm still at that moment where I'm kind of planning from visit to visit. Am I clear? Am I not? So looking ahead past next summer, for example, I'm like, I can't quite plan for that yet because I want to see how it goes when I have my checkup in February. So it shifted my personal perspective to be sort of closer, but it hasn't impacted it's still able to look longer term professionally. So that's slightly odd.
You've had such an amazing life, and even before your cancer experience, you had a hell of a story to tell. And now, your story is quite incredible. And I know that what you've said, sort of talking through, and thank you for being so candid about it all, will help so many other people, who might be facing this or wondering, will I ever be back to normal and will I ever get through this? So I think it's a story that's full of inspiration, and I just know that, you will continue moving forward and doing the very best that you can, because that's who you are, and that's why I love you so much, and one of the reasons anyway. So just to wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to say that you haven't already said? Just give you that opportunity.
Well, to say it again, just thank you for all your love and care, and I love you very much too. My husband and my sons were incredible, but also the care that I received in the hospital. There were a few quite junior nurses sometimes that would just come up and put a hand on my shoulder and just say, "How are you doing today?" And I can't tell you how much that meant to be treated like a human being.
Yes. That compassion at moments of real vulnerability, really important. So I think that's a really good message, I think, to our health colleagues, that what little things, little gestures really matter, don't they? So
it takes a few seconds and it actually changes your whole day.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much.